There's been a lot of noise about BMW lately. Negativity, backlash against their new high-profile cars, social media faux pas, widespread disapproval of the design of their new M3. Listen to the internet and you'd think they've lost the plot. But what if you switch off that noise and listen objectively for yourself?
This is the brand new 6th generation BMW M3. And I can't think of another car that's as controversial, yet as anticipated, as loved, yet as hated as this thing. And whatever you think of this car, I don't think there can be any disagreement that BMW have not played it safe, not in the slightest. Their design philosophy when building the new M3 was go big or go home. And they definitely didn't go home.
Especially with the power. In the UK, BMW will only sell the M3 Competition, which uses an updated version of the S58 engine, making 510 horsepower and 650 newton meters of torque, allowing for 0 to 62 in 3.9 seconds, and with the M Drivers Pack, 189 miles an hour flat out. It's the fastest, most powerful BMW M3 in history.
We live in a world now where performance cars are almost unrecognizable. So many manufacturers are downsizing, turbocharging, hybridizing, electrifying. But with this, it feels like BMW are sticking to their guns. 3 liters, 6 cylinders, big power, and a noise that reminds you this is a proper M3. Although there is an elephant in the room though, isn't there? I mean, elephant's probably the wrong word. I should have chosen a different animal, maybe rabbit, because that grille looks like a giant set of rabbit's teeth, like Bugs Bunny, gone horribly wrong. But I will be the one dissenting voice on the internet because I happen to think, in the flesh, it's not so bad.
And actually, there's a method behind the design madness. BMW say an engine like the S58 requires extra cooling. Although for it to need this much cooling probably means it runs at over 40 million degrees. But who wants their car bursting into flames? This is form and function. Maybe we should be grateful.
I also really like these headlights. These are the optional laser lights. I love the blue accents inside, that really sculpted design, and how dark it is inside there. It just looks super menacing. Whoever designed the M3 clearly loved vents. If you look at the bonnet, it looks as if there's a set of vents up here, look a bit like extra nostrils. They're not real vents, but they look like vents. There are also vents down here on the lower section which feed cold air into the brakes, and also on the sides, extra vents that funnel air around the wheels to make the car more aerodynamically efficient. This has a couple of different wheel designs and wheel finishes, and weirdly, I like all of them. It's unusual for a manufacturer to release a new car with new wheel designs, and I don't have a problem with any single one. But BMW have absolutely nailed it. You get 20s at the back and 19s at the front. Personally, I would have preferred to see 20s at the front as well because these 19s look a little bit lost in this front wheel arch. Michelin Pilot Sport 4Ss. In terms of brakes, you have a choice of either carbon or steel. If you go for steel, you get 380mm discs at the front, while the carbons are 400mm. If you get the carbons, you save around 15 kilograms of weight all around, and you get some snazzy gold calipers. If you get the steel brakes, you have a choice of either red, black, or blue. As for the rest of the car, this one has the carbon pack, so you get carbon everywhere, carbon on the front grille, carbon on the wing mirrors, carbon roof as standard, as well as some glossy black elements, including down here on the sills and on this M badge. This is the M3, of course, which means that it's a 4-door, and I can confirm that there is loads of legroom and loads of headroom inside this car. Round the back, meanwhile, probably this car's best angle, actually. If you look at it from the rear 3/4, it looks sensational. Highlights for me include this carbon spoiler around the back, and if you notice, it's got this little cutout section where the edges line up perfectly with a couple of bulges in the carbon roof. These lights look really good as well. They pop out, they have a slightly 3D effect, shaped almost like hockey pucks. And then down here, really aggressive lower diffuser. And look at this, Mercedes, pay attention, real exhausts. None of this fakery.
So that's the outside. Slightly controversial in places, definitely not as bad as the internet makes out, but if you were thinking they'd played it safe with the inside, well then you'd be very wrong.
I think the design direction with the new M3 was basically make it look like an M5 or an M8, but with more carbon. So you get carbon on the dashboard, carbon on the center console, carbon on the steering wheel, and carbon on the shifter paddles. I honestly think they've nailed it. BMW and Mercedes are at the top of the luxury class right now when it comes to interiors, and this thing just feels really special. Maybe the coolest thing about the interior is the leather and the seats. It just looks absolutely sensational. There's so much variety in the available colors, and you can customize it and personalize it to make it your own. These are the optional M carbon buckets. They look amazing, but the best thing about them is that even though they're carbon, you can still adjust them, and they're actually quite comfortable. The actual seat position is really good. There's so much adjustability. You can slam them on the deck to get a real sense of being connected with the car. Huge amounts of adjustability in the steering wheel. The M3 comes with acoustic glass on the windscreen and on the front windows. Basically double glazing that helps to keep out as much of the noise as possible. Do I need it? I'm not sure I do in this type of car. In fact, I'd like to be able to hear a little bit of that engine, but it still sounds pretty decent. As for the ride quality, well, earlier on I moaned a little bit about the fact that it's got 19-inch wheels on the front, but I think they've played a bit of a blinder with that because it's actually got a really, really nice ride, and I think having 19s plays a big part in that. So many modern performance cars have huge 20-inch wheels and bigger, and they feel really abrasive, really brittle. BMW X3M in particular. So I was a little bit worried about this car before I got into it, but no, it rides really nicely, it's really comfortable, really smooth, and it's a lot of fun.
Another huge change for this year's M3 is the transmission. The competition cars in the UK won't come with a manual option, and BMW have dumped the dual clutch gearbox found in the previous generation and replaced it with an 8-speed ZF automatic box. They say it's been calibrated specifically for this engine and can change gear in less than 150 milliseconds, but is it as good as the DCT? The short answer is no.
They still have the Drive Logic selector system on the gear shifter, and you can choose the aggressiveness and speed of your gear shifts. But honestly, even in the most aggressive mode, it's nothing compared to the old DCT. That thing would feel like you were being kicked by a horse every time you changed gear. But in this, even though the shifts are quick and the gearbox does give you the gear you want, they've calibrated it really, really nicely. I think it's not quite as fun as having a DCT. I'll tell you what, that engine more than makes up for the transmission though. It's an absolute animal. You get peak torque of 650 Newton meters between around 3,000 RPM and 5,500, but peak power comes in at just over 6,000 RPM, so it really pays to keep your foot planted and just ride that surge of RPMs up towards a glorious crescendo of power. I know it's a turbocharged engine, but it's doing a really decent impression of a naturally aspirated one. Bravo BMW for this unit.
You can drive your M3 in a number of ways. Push the M mode button and you can choose between road, sport and track. Road gives you a surprisingly smooth, chilled ride, while sport and track give you increasing levels of aggression from the brakes, throttle and dampers.
Regardless of what settings you've applied, the car always feels so much fun to drive. It doesn't deliver the last word in steering feedback, but you can feel the grip levels on the front end, which goes a long way to trusting exactly what this car is going to do in the middle of a corner. It feels like it has this low center of gravity, partly down to that carbon roof, partly down to the driving position. So when you're in the car, you feel really connected to the thing. There's no body roll, the steering is sparse without being too hyperactive. And it's playful, it really is. You put your foot down coming out of a corner and it wants to light up the back wheels. I'm gonna hold off giving it a definitive verdict because I don't feel like I've spent enough time with this car to really get under the skin of this thing. But what I can tell you is that on first impressions, I think they've done a tremendous job with the M3. Not that there was any doubt really, they couldn't afford to fail with this car. And the scary thing is, it's only going to get better. They also do an M4, a two-door version. They're going to do an M3 Estate. They're going to do a forthcoming X-Drive version, which gives you all-wheel drive, which is switchable to two-wheel drive, which means this car is going to be the gift that keeps on giving.
BMW's recent decisions, especially when it comes to design direction or their social media faux pas, have been questionable. Some of the chatter on Twitter, Instagram, and in YouTube comments isn't totally unfounded. But forget the comments, forget the hatred, because the bottom line is that the M3 proves that BMW can still deliver cars that are brave, bold, forward-looking, and most importantly, fun.